Good evening, everyone. I thought after last week's lesson, I thought more of y'all would go to the other class tonight. But. So I'm going to make a statement here that just popped in my mind. And I don't know, maybe I'm going to ask you not to repeat it because I'm going to probably say too much. So I just had a nephew get up and read, and to my knowledge, he's never gotten up here and read. And if been in situations like that, to think back to your first time, sometimes your legs are shaking and your palms are sweaty. And then a few moments behind that, I saw his brother get up to lead a song, but before he did, he told him good job. And then I watched a young man get baptized the other day, and in the very next service, he gets up here and leads a prayer. And I have chills from head to toe. I don't know. I feel like the Lord is at work, obviously, and I feel like for the midweek service, to get whatever the word is, re-energized to finish the week, I feel like I've already got enough, just from that, if that makes sense. So I just thought that was really special, just sitting back there watching that, and I don't know, the more I live, seems like we watch kids, sometimes we can learn a lot, so really, really special. So the book of Psalms, just a quick intro that we talked about last week, kind of models the full spectrum of human emotion, directing it toward God. Helps us out a great deal. Like I said, I do think it has some similarities with Proverbs, with some lessons about handle yourself. I think it's ways that we're supposed to think, ways that we're supposed to act, and ways that we're supposed to carry ourselves regardless of the highs and lows and whatever Satan has thrown our way. I have been really, quite honestly, I've been really overwhelmed studying it. I have, and trying to narrow it down to what to talk about. I've really enjoyed the parts about learning about God's character, of course, the worship and praise, the singing, that part of it, which you could build a whole class around. The lament and suffering that people go through that we know that you read about in here, and then, of course, trusting God and having that trust. So just so much of it is reassuring, because when you know that God's on your side, then really nothing else matters. And to make that statement maybe even better, when you're on God's side, nothing else really matters. Material things, anything in this world, it doesn't matter. There is no single more greater, if that's proper English, better thing than being a child of God and living your life for Him. There's just absolutely nothing better. And, it by far, thanks to Jesus, has the best retirement benefit plan that any of us have ever even begun to have. So just a little bit. So, I start thinking about, you go to school and you go to history class, and, you don't go through that, about learning certain things. You're going to learn about the Constitution. You're going to learn about some presidents. They're going to hit the high notes, and then you're going to switch classes, and you're going to get into math, and they're going to teach you. You're going to have to learn how to solve for X. I always had a problem with letters and math, but they do that. You're going to learn that, and then you're going to go to English class, and whether you like it or not, you are going to have to write a research paper. It is going to happen. There's just no way around it. And what I'm building up to is what I'm going to focus on tonight, because even the world is familiar a little bit with what we're going to talk about tonight. Even the people that don't know a whole lot about the Bible, they're a little bit familiar, or at least have been exposed to it slightly. You don't go through the book of Psalms and without people around you or the world or God putting it in your life, you don't go through that without having Psalms 23 brought to your attention. Psalms 23 is very famous. It's very popular. If you've been to church at all, you've probably heard it taught about. You've heard it recited. People that have had it memorized. It has always kind of been a go-to, I guess, and thought, as much as it is, maybe that's something one of these days that begins with a starting point. Unfortunately, sometimes today when you teach somebody something, for some of us, for Mike, it's not an issue to start in Revelation. For me, I would struggle a little bit. Now, we're learning on that, so that's been a good thing. And he's taught us on that several times. But, because of the popularity of Psalms 23, kind of like John 3:16, things like that in the world today, maybe this will be the crack of the door sometimes that you can, maybe help bring somebody to Christ. I know as I studied through it, I really like it, and that's what I just wanted to dedicate tonight to. I've really spent some time researching it and reading it, meditating on it, if you will. And also, I thought back to lessons in my life that I heard it, and I can remember specific church buildings I was in when I heard it preached about, and then of course I knew one person that quoted it quite often, and I don't know, it just seemed like when he quoted it, it just seemed like a calming effect. I don't know. So Psalms chapter 23, if you will, let's read the text. So Psalm of David, 6 verses. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So there's no doubt in my mind, you've read that yourself, and you have heard that several times in your life, because like we said, it's very popular even in the world. I mean, it's pretty popular. It's out there. Now, I want to say this as I repeat what I've heard before. Just because of the popularity of this one, it doesn't take away from the rest of them, but it just so happens this is the one we're going to talk about tonight. See, when you're the teacher, you can do that. Okay, so I got experience of that, and you get to talk about what I want to talk about. And before I really dive into it, I really like Mike saying, if you mess it up, you clean it up. So I may mess this up. I'm not sure how to clean it up, but I'm going to try. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So right off the bat, found something on the internet where, of course, everything is true. And I found a couple of these that I occasionally see something and I'll think it's worth pondering about or worth reading or worth thinking about. And I do this all the time, not just with Bible stuff. I do this with quotes and all kinds of stuff. My picture folder, or whatever you call it, is full of all kinds of little tidbits, and sometimes I go back through them. But I did read this on the internet. Psalm 23 is powerful because of its beautiful poetic imagery of a benevolent shepherd caring for a vulnerable sheep, which conveys divine provision, protection, and intimate guidance. The vivid picture offers comfort, assurance, and a deep sense of peace by reminding readers of God's constant presence, unwavering love, and abundant provision, even in the darkest and most fearful of times. So I think it encompasses a lot of what we talked about last week, that Psalms does as a whole. It's going to have those comforting moments. It's going to have, in my opinion, it opens up just an array of ways to deepen your relationship with God, if you'll just kind of let the Bible talk to you. And, in the good times and the bad times, it does all those things. So let's talk, first of all, of a shepherd and a sheep. The Lord is my shepherd. Okay? So if the Lord is our shepherd, then who are the sheep? We are. Yeah, we're the sheep. Okay? I mean, I know that's a simple one, but yeah, absolutely. We have to see that. We have to accept that. We have to realize that. You have to realize that. And then, so who owns the sheep? The shepherd, which is who? Yeah, God. Jesus said. All that Jesus. There's so much of Psalms 2 directs us toward Jesus, but absolutely, And so, if you have a shepherd that owns sheep, who controls those sheep? It's the shepherd. He is the one that controls them. If you think about, in some ways, the sheep really, really rely on the shepherd, especially in these days. They rely on the shepherd to direct them in places to where there are greener pastures that we're going to get into in a little bit. Matter of fact, they rely on the shepherd just a whole lot, because when it comes to fighting or maybe defending yourself on their own, I wouldn't say the sheep is the toughest of animals, right? If you look at the world today. Now, when the shepherd is there, that changes things, because the shepherd is watching over them, okay, if you will. So I'm just going to, just trying to lay it out and show the comparison, between that. And the shepherd, he protects the sheep. He's the one that protects them. And, I was raised with sheep. I mean, we had them a lot growing up. And it was interesting because the sheep, like they knew who I was. I really believe that. They knew. And I'm fixing to make another parallel here. They knew my voice. The sheep out in the field, they know who the shepherd is. They know the voice of that person, of that one. They do. And that just kind of makes that parallel to us, as to following Jesus. We know who our voice is. God said, "Hear ye him." I mean, we know who it is that we're supposed to be following. We should know who the shepherd is. And if we don't, then we need to start, really studying and trying to find out. Find out. And says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." I read something that went like this: when God is in control of a person's life, all of their needs will be met, leading to a state of contentment and security. And I thought that was really neat. I thought that was a quote that got my attention too. When God's in control, and He is in control, and all of our needs will be met. I've never been to a third world country. I've never been, and I'm sure this happens. But in my lifetime, I've never seen, really, in this area, I've been in this area my whole life, I've never seen, a Christian suffer, maybe because of food or what have you. I just haven't seen that. Now, it may be because people are helping him, but, that's the whole purpose, of the whole gospel anyway, is helping one another. But it just seems like to me that when you're under God's, when you're one of God's people, it just seems like that you're always taken care of, So, I'm asking the question, people out there, they don't have a shepherd, but a lot of times when I teach classes, I don't want to always talk about the people out there, because we know what they need. So to direct it at us, is he your shepherd? Is he where you turn to first and foremost? When you're having issues, when you're having problems, is he the one that you call upon during these tough times? Is he the one that you pray to immediately when you have these issues? Is he the one that you go to? Because when I read about a real sheep and a real shepherd, I mean, they're pretty reliant on that shepherd, are they not? To protect them, to keep them safe, to take care of their food, take care of their water, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Okay, it's just all, it just all hit home with me, like I said, because I was raised with them almost, or I had them a lot of my life. And looking back, I don't always like them because, first off, they constantly got out. You know, we did not have good fences, and a man once told me that a sheep was born to find a place to die. And you know, they're very hard-headed. But anyway, so I shall not want. Talk to me. What does that mean? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want.
Do what? I lack nothing.
Lack nothing. I totally agree. You know, when God's on your side, how do you lack? Or when you're on God's side, how do you lack anything? You know? Anybody else? You know, I shall not want. What comes to your mind when you hear that? Yeah, that's exactly right. All your needs are supplied. You just feel like things will be taken care of, with the understanding that it will be difficult at times. You know what I mean? With that understanding, and that the Bible clearly teaches that you'll face some persecutions and hard times. It never promised you that it was roses the entire time, you know, but it did make some promises that make it all worth it. Okay, so moving on to chapter 2, and please stop me if you have. Like I said, I've got a lot I want to talk about each passage and things I want to say. So if you have something to say, please stop me, because it would help me out as well.
Chapter 10, when he mentions about the good shepherd and the sheep, I mean, he tells it right there, you know, people will enter, but they will come over the gate. You know, he's the gatekeeper. He lets them in. You know, because people will try to come. And as you mentioned how famous this passage is, you know, the world uses it. You know, they get in trouble, and I've seen families do it, get in trouble with something, and they quote this, and you're like, you back then, I'm like, you've never even been to church, man. But you can quote Psalms 23, and you're like, oh yeah, you know, he's got me. He's got you. What do you mean he got you?
Yeah.
I see you do this and do that, and you don't even believe. What are you talking
about? You know, sometimes you can get in a false sense of understanding to where, you know, you see that, you know it's there, and perhaps you can quote it, but you're not walking the walk like Jesus did. I mean, you walking the walk and talking the talk of perfection, okay? And we're supposed to be following his footprints. And, you know, the effort he put forth compared to the effort we can put forth can be embarrassing on our part. And so it's something that absolutely takes, it takes a lot of falling in line on our part, you know. And why do people do not? Why do people have a problem claiming a shepherd? You know, why would people have a problem with that? One thing comes to my mind. They don't want to follow, and yeah, I like how you follow that. They don't want to lead, but you know, in their minds, they want to be their own shepherd. You know, they want to. I think selfishness comes in. I think selfishness has a big part of it, and you know, we got to be careful because it can creep back in to us. You know, so we have to really be careful. You know, of that also. So, but you're right. A lot of times people don't want to be. They want to be their own leader, and you know, that there may be some good things there, but at the same time, we're not talking about trying to move up the ladder at work. We're talking about following God, okay? And there's a big, big difference. So, okay, verse 2. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. One passage I found read like this. God leads us into work, into service for him. And I like that. And when I read that, it reminded me that one time Mike said in one of the lessons, you know, one of his comments was, you know, a lot of times everybody in a church kind of has a job. And that's kind of a good thing. You know, if you have something that you do that everybody helps, you know, and on the flip side of that, if you don't have a job, you know, I don't know, put it in scary language, you know, maybe you need to do a little bit more to help out, you know, I don't know. But, you know, and that's the first thing come to my mind when I read that passage about God leads us into work, into service for him. And we're supposed to be living for him, doing the things that he wants to do. You know, and if you're a faithful churchgoer, and then you have things that you do that help the church, I mean, that's fantastic. That's really good, because we all know it's easy to come in here and sit and warm a pew and get up and leave. Okay, that's easy. One example, I know every Wednesday night when it's time to clean up, I know Ronnie's going around table to table. And Ronnie, if you want to know, I see heads nodding because they know that you do. Ronnie's always willing to help, always, and that's motivated me before, and it's neat how good things. Fire spreads. Sometimes fire's negative, but good things spread too. Okay, and that's a really good thing. So, let me finish the quote. God leads us into work, into service for Him. Rest in the green pastures and refreshment by the still waters are to fit us for work. I thought that was really neat. When I did study on green pastures and still waters, I started thinking about the shepherd and the sheep and how important green pastures are, how important water is. A still water. The shepherd brings the sheep to the still water, not a Russian Niagara Falls. I thought I read something that talked a little bit about that. But a still water to where the sheep are safe, green pastures to where they can nourish their bodies. These green pastures and still waters, a lot of the stuff pointed to like rest within us, if that makes sense. We talked about this last week a little bit when the Bible talks about being still. If we be quiet or if we listen, this can spider web out in a lot of things, but they're good things, so stay with me. If we're a type of person that listen, because sometimes all people want is you to lend your ear. They want somebody that will listen to him. I know one time I was at my office at work a couple of years back, and there was a guy that just talked all the time. He was one of the hardest workers I ever saw. He was a coach. He was old, and he was just talking left and right. And I finally turned around and I said, "Coach, who are you talking to?" And he said, "Anybody that'll listen." And it was the greatest thing. And but that's right. Some people just need that. Can a sheep relax without a shepherd? I don't think so. How safe are we without a shepherd? Not very. We talk about this many Sundays. Trying to get to heaven by yourself, good luck with that, right? And Jesus is the one that paid the price. He's the one that paid for us. And we can read examples in the Bible, people almost trying to get there by yourself. And, even when you go into the judgment, you don't, we haven't done enough. We can't get anywhere close to what Jesus did for all of mankind. So, I don't think so. And if you if you start turning it into paralleling it a little bit, no, the sheep can't relax without him. They rely on him to lead them to food. They rely on him to get them to water. We're going to talk about the rod and staff in a minute. He protects them. He's constantly watching, because when you're a sheep, guess what? You have predators. You have predators, and I know because we had them. And it was anything from coyotes to even dogs. Dogs, they got the taste of blood, and we had dogs that chased after the sheep. They were our own dogs. I mean, that just kind of happened. So, yeah, that having the shepherd is very, very important. Somebody have a hand over here? Yes, sir.
You led us in the aspect of, our needs are met. So when they come to green pastures, it's home. Yeah. Pasture. Yeah. It's their home. Yeah. They feel comfortable. They feel comfortable there. Eat that green grass, which is tender.
Yeah, it's nice when you look around and see your next meal. That's a good feeling compared to being a sheep in the desert, right? That's not a very relaxing feeling when there's nothing to eat.
Well, if you're in the desert, I don't know how much really grass.
Cactus. All right, y'all gonna laugh at this one. I've never heard this before, but I'm gonna say it. But it did make sense. I read somewhere on this internet thing. The sheep have trouble falling asleep. I don't know who studied that. I don't know who come up with it. It sounds silly, but I kind of get it. I kind of get it. You know, when I read that, because without a shepherd there, they're worried about the fear of predators, safety, you know, my next meal, greener pastures, water, you know, rely pretty heavy on a shepherd, which, how about our lives? You know, how much do we rely on? You know, Jesus Christ gave his life for all of mankind. We rely on that very heavy. We sure don't want it to be based on our deeds because we haven't done enough. We don't want it to be based on how good we are because we've all made mistakes daily. We don't want it based on that stuff. So, you know, the text says, he makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. So when I see the word still, S-T-I-L-L, I don't know. I just think of the word peaceful. I think of the word peaceful. And that is just a good word. If you've ever been in an array in your life, if you've ever had trouble, if you're so many different things, if you're having hardships, you're just wanting a moment of peace. Regardless of what you're having, when you have peace in your life, it just seems like, it's almost like if they could just sell it, we would spend a lot of money buying it. I mean, it's something we take for granted because a lot of it have it all the time. Sometimes I think some people don't know really what it's like to not have it. They're always at a peace, but when you don't have it, things can get pretty hectic, you know. The words lie down in green pasture, L-I-E, not telling a lie like a story, but lying down, and the word steal that we talked about. Can lie and steal, those, I hadn't even thought about that. I just said that. It almost sounds like I'm saying lying and stealing. That's not what I mean. I mean the other ones. Lie down and be still. Can lie and steal be in the same sentence as the busy life that we have today? I mean, we have busy lives. I've watched Leave It to Beaver. I grew up watching that. It ain't like that. Not anymore. It's not like that. We're to blame. We kind of made it this way. It's busy and hectic. So how do we balance that in our busy lives that we have now? How do you have that lie and that stillness, that peacefulness? How do you have that in our lifestyle nowadays? Question mark. Yeah. 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 That is so funny. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I did not have this planned. You talking about he shut something down or maybe took something out of your life. I think I've had some coworkers, I've had some friends that for whatever reason are not in my life anymore. Maybe they moved off and they just weren't a good influence on me. And they're not there anymore. And I've had that thought before. God involved there. You know, I mean, I don't know. I like that you mentioned that, though. But that's exactly right. There are things in our life that get shut down. I think some of that comes with maturity when we realize we don't need to be a part of that anymore. But I think the more I read about it, the more I study Psalms, the more I study the Bible, just realizing how God is constantly at work. Growing up, I just don't know if we talked about that as much. I'm not knocking anybody. I'm just saying to realize that his awesomeness and how he's at work in everybody's lives. And I feel like I just see it. I feel like I see it in my life. I don't, you know, I'm just kind of maybe sharing opinions here. You know, not all of my life has been roses. But I'm going to tell you right now, if I could live it again, I would do it. I feel that blessed. I really do. I feel blessed. So, I don't know. Does our busy life, nowadays, do we get rested and replenished? Talking about, do we get that? Yeah. How do you get that? Come to church on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock? Maybe, right? You know, get yourself around like-minded people. perhaps. I just wanted, when I started seeing these things and the references to how much is needed and the peace and the busy life, that just, I have asked, when I got at the bottom, I made a notation. Have we really missed this one? And I was really talking to myself. Have I really missed understanding this one, the depth of it, because I've been guilty of letting things get really busy in my life. Okay? All right, no other ones. Let's go to verse 3. Okay, it says, He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. So if He restores, when? Has your soul, have you been restored before? When? And yes, ma'am. Difficult times. Perfect. That's exactly right. When I'm struggling. Anybody ever struggled? Amen to that. Anybody ever hurt? Hurt. I mean, and I'm talking about physical hurt. The hurt we talk about it, our hearts broke or whatever. I'm talking about hurt. Like, sometimes you don't see that one because we do the old, I'm doing fine, but we're really not. But God has restored us because on so many instances in my life, and I'm just speaking on behalf of mine, and I'm sure it's been the same you, or just when you've been bothered, by something, it just kind of nags at you. It just don't go away, it just kind of stays there, and but the Lord's always there to restore it. God's path is always right. I love the word righteousness because it starts with the word right. I was a new coach, 2005, got my first head coaching job. And so I wanted to be ahead of the game, so I went through the list, made a list. If you're late to practice, you got to do this. If the locker room's messy, you got to do this. If you get in trouble at school, you got to do this. I just made all these rules, whatever. And I took it and showed it to my boss, and he read through them all. He said, why didn't you just get a sheet of paper and put, do what is right? So I went back and I typed it at the bottom, just do what is right. And then I posted it. But, when you think of righteousness right off, the first person that comes to mind is Jesus Christ, like the most righteous, like we can't even compare. And it's almost like when you think of righteousness, it's like only He fits in that category in terms of not ever messing up, And we know we mess up, and we can still. David is a man after God's own heart. Okay, so we know that, but I just think the word righteousness is just righteous is a deep, deep, deep word. Also, somebody that values trying to do what is right. Value that. A buddy of mine, his son got hit this morning, or a car, a little wreck, whatever. And I was like, well, the other guy have insurance? And he said, they don't know. He didn't stop. He just kept going. And it's just like, what is wrong? I mean, what in the world is, I'll tell you what is wrong. The opposite of wrong is right. And there's too much wrong and not enough right. Well, that took a bachelor's degree to say that, didn't it? I mean, so with God, we are always on the right track. With God, you're always on the right track. I think this verse, like I said, we're digging deep. He leads me in paths of righteousness. He restores. That is so important. It's so deep. It's very much to understand that. I'm already running out of time. 10 minutes. I've been through 3 verses, or 20 minutes. Anyway, verse 4, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Okay? Valley, the valley is not always, it can be more than just death. Kind of like what you talked about a while ago. It could be struggles. It could be sickness. It could be pain. Okay? It could be failure. It could be disappointment. You ever been disappointed? Yeah, I mean, it can be, you've been devastated. I mean, just devastated. All these things, It can be every one of these. Let's talk about fear for a minute. You ever been just completely overcome with it? I think of my childhood. Went out to my pawpaw's pond. My daddy helped me put up a trot line. So at school, got out the next day and went out there to check it. So I reached out there. It's tree to tree, old-fashioned one, nylon, and I could pull it, you know, and I could, all the hooks would raise up, and I could see if anything was on it. Okay, nothing was on it, but all my bait was gone, so I didn't have any luck. So I'm like 11. Okay, so I grabbed that cord, and I'm holding it, and I lift my leg over it, and I'm holding it right there. Now I can bait the first 3 hooks and let it go back in the water. So at least I can keep fishing a little bit, right? I mean, you know, it's kind of what you did back in the days when you didn't have video games, right? So I had my cheese or bread or whatever I was using. I bait the first 3 hooks. I went like this, and here's what I did. And the hook went, and it caught me by the finger and nearly jerked me in the water. And I'm stuck there, 11 years old, stuck, and it's pulling on my finger because it is in there. Okay, so after middle of my crying, I got it back up under my leg, and I look at it, and that made it worse. You know, a lot of times you're fine until you see blood, then it's worse. You know, and the hook's got a big barb in it. I can't get it out. I mean, I'm 11, or whatever I was. I was little. So then I start screaming at every neighbor. Well, the neighbors are not next door. They're way over there and way over there. You know, nobody hears me, and I'm just crying. And I thought, I'm going to be here forever. You know, that's what I thought. And long story short, I finally untied this with my teeth in my left hand, and then went to the doctor and got it fixed and all that. But, you know, that was some fear right there, from especially a kid. And that's what I wanted to bring out, is that what it's like to be scared when you're a kid. That it's one of the, we all get traumatized sometimes, you know. Grayson, I won't tell your story, but anyway. Some certain boys that lived in our house convinced him a witch was under his bed when he was a child, and I'll let him finish that story. So, rod and the staff, what does that mean? Something I found. Not only is he with you, he will guard you from evil. The rod was a club carried by the shepherd to fend off wild animals. The staff is the shepherd's crook that he uses to lift the lambs into his arms. So the rod and the staff speak of the strength and the love of the good shepherd. And that just all made sense to me. You know, it made sense. They're very important. The text says, I will fear no evil. Do you fear evil? Do you fear it? You know, I don't know. Do you? I mean, I'll be lying to you if I tell you I didn't get scared before. I mean, you know, so my question now is, do you fear evil? You know, do I fear evil? I mean, the text says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. You know. Well, this is kind of a, well, no, I'm not going there. But, you know, I don't know. Do you have that fear in you? I mean, I'm asking y'all. I don't know.
Where God wants us to be, and there's never a time, always in our life, that we're not going to be, I think, fearful of something, even though we shouldn't be, but I think we're all just believe that we are going to be that way at some point.
Yeah. You know, I think when you're a Christian, I hope I'm not off from this. Y'all can correct me. I'm okay with that. I mean, I can have times when I get scared, but I still feel like the end result, I know at the end of whatever happens, you know, I know I belong to the Lord, you know, and you have that sureness and that confidence, right, of where we're going to end up one day. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, ma'am.
To go through. There is
Really
a
good.
beginning and an end.
That's really good. You know, I have been told as a teacher before, when you're going through rough times, they told me all things will pass. When you're a young teacher, they would tell me that, and I would hold on to that because there were some moments that I wanted to pass, you know. And so, no, really, really good comment. Thank you for that. I liked this one. I like this. I found this little story, little bitty. So follow along, or let me read this to you actually. Kind of tugged at my heart a little bit too. A father was once holding his little blind daughter. That already tugged at my heart. Blind daughter on his knee, when a friend who had called took her in his arms. The child didn't cry or resist. "Aren't you afraid, darling?" the father asked. And you don't know who has you. I mean, she's blind. She said, "No, I don't know, but you do." Okay, this is already getting good, right? You do. She didn't have to know if the father knew that it was all right. Her faith in him took away the fear. And I just thought, what a great story. You know, I think sometimes we need to apply that, not my will, God, but, you know, ultimately, whatever you want, we're good with it, you know. Having that trust in him, having that comfort. It ended with comfort. Having that comfort of knowing that you know, as long as you're on God's side, you know, like we've talked about in Revelation, you know, you want to be on the correct team. As long as you're on that team, you know, eternity is going to be heavenly, you know. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. Yes.
That's what God does for us. He protects us.
Yes, ma'am. That's so true. And there was no hesitation in her either, was it? She knew right off the bat. And you, when you have that, you know, then you see while the Psalms it almost breathes forth inside of you the comfort and the peace and the understanding and the trust and deepen your relationship. And I've really gotten to enjoy Psalms, if y'all hadn't figured it out. Like, I'm not there really yet at teaching. Like, I'm not completely comfortable with how I'm presenting it, but I've been fascinated, if you will. Okay. Moving on. Verse 5. Almost out of time. I've got to hurry. "You prepare a table for me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over." So this is the last one I found. I want to read to you something that said, "It is then, after you leave the valley, you will find his holy table. The table illustrates abundance, satisfaction, and everlasting love. God's people can feast at his table of endless love and grace, and no enemy of any sort can ever take it away. They can only feel annoyed that you were victorious and prosperous in spite of them." I like when it says everlasting love. I like that part of that quote. You can get that everlasting. You know, everlasting doesn't stop. That's like eternity. Eternity is coming for us one way or another. I prefer to be in the good place. I read also, it said, God's blessings here and hereafter is more than we can receive, really. I mean, it really is. Let me go. It's 7 o'clock. Let me read this last part, and then we'll call it a class. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." I believe this has been quoted in here before, and I think the first time I heard this, it might have been one of Mike's lessons, it may have been one of y'all teaching, I don't remember. One thing I found, I've heard before in this building: goodness is God giving us what we don't deserve. Okay? Mercy is God not giving us what we do deserve. And reading those just really fell intact there to me with that verse. Okay? Going through that. As I went through these, one thing I was supposed to tell you in going through all of this is that every verse was summed up into 2 words at the very end. I thought the first verse, the 2 words, it had a dash in it. Lord dash I. You know, it talked about the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. 2 words, Lord I. And in that order. Lord comes first, then I. Okay? And then it gets real simple. Okay. Verse 2, he leads. Verse 3, he restores. Verse 4, he protects. Verse 5, he provides. Verse 6, he loves. That's everything in that whole thing. And it's a comforting feeling when you have every bit of that. You can sum up each one of them with 2 words. It starts out, Lord, I, then you go to love, restore, protect, leads. You know, we just have to be there to follow. We need to be there to allow him to work in our life. Continue a strong prayer life. I think we just all should be at constant work. If I'm learning anything by studying this, I think we need to be at constant work of having that relationship with God and how we talk to him and how we're trying to live our lives, how he wants us to live. I always go back to simple terms. You know, you think of your best friends, the people you're closest to. You have constant conversation with them, whether it's good or bad. You know, and why would we not have that much or more with the Father above? And not only that, but when you're having that conversation with the Father above, you have Jesus interceding for you. Okay? So, only thing I can say is this is all good stuff. Anybody have any comments? We're about out of time. Let's close with a prayer. Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, for everything that you blessed us with. Thank you, Lord, for this church here. We feel it's a good church. We can come here and worship with people that believe in you and follow you and work to be righteous people in your eyes. Lord, we're constantly trying to set the right example because we know people are watching us, and it's so important. Help us to be mindful of that each every day. Help us to see opportunities where people need help, not just wait for them, to seek them and help people out, as we have all been hurting, just like that particular person might be. Lord, please be with the ones less fortunate. We know how rich we are, and please, Lord, just watch over us. And thank you most of all for Jesus. He gave his life for each and every one of us, and we are so very thankful. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Thank y'all.